I know what I didn't do.
Right, right.
First of all, in terms of weapons, everybody was collecting weapons by hook or crook, stealing them. At that time, stealing, trading, buying them from Jews, from Goyim. The Bricha, which had a lot of lovely young Jewish boys, but I always said they looked like blonde shkutzim, because they were told what to do, they did it. But the suffering that's required to be a sneaky Jew, sneaky in a good sense, they lacked. So I remember they collected, you brought it up, they collected, and one day, it was in a French zone, a camp. The French officer came, and he said, he was our friend, but he was another one of those recipients of the packages for girls. But his commandant had an inspection, and they found something like 23 handguns. Nobody, of course, knew who it was. He knew. The Brecha was collecting guns and holding it in there so securely that it was picked up. All right, we got him back. I know that my office was a collection point, and so was Herb's, to a degree, to Jewish officers. By whatever means, would take individual guns. We would collect them, turn them over to the representative from Palestine, and off it would go. We would not ship them. It wasn't necessary because it had to be broken in. The more, as I say, the more exotic things, you had to have money. You had to have dollars. I remember in Sweden, because I had contacts in Sweden through a Jewish man and his Christian wife, who divorced him and married an officer, a Swedish officer in Berlin, and he became part of the party. Because of that, we paid $600 some odd for a Thompson submachine gun in dollars. They screwed us, but it was necessary. I had some contact in Belgium.
When was this, by the way?
This was 46, 47. 46, late 46, 47. He was an Englishman who had certain outfits. I knew him. As a matter of fact, after the war, I decided to break away from the Jews and go into business. I became his representative in the United States before I came back. He had big factories. Courtrai, Courtrai in Belgium. He lost them during the war. The Germans took him away, so he decided to be the middleman for weapons. It's in this way that the weapons were gathered. But the Israelis really were the ones.
Right, but the chaplains and yourself were...
Everyone would be approached. The chaplain, if he trusted, the chaplain trusted me, he says, hey, Helvarg, this is it. The JDC, IJDC could do more than the chaplain, because if I had to pay, I had it. Whether dollars or pounds or mark or cigarettes. Cigarettes was the exchange. These were the things. Look, there are so many things. And I don't know what the hell they did to the archive. I imagine that they transferred many of the archives from Paris or from Geneva now. Yeah. I would suggest to you that you dig in the 46 on, because until 46, they were too busy in gathering the Jews.
Are there any other people that you would suggest that I speak to?
Eli Rock,
Right.
Henry Levy, he's in Israel.
Yeah.
You have a fairly good coverage on that. Sam Dollop in Cincinnati. Sam was in the British. Dollop, D-A-L-L-O-B. He also is an associate of mine.
And he's in Cincinnati?
Cincinnati. He is now the manager for Cincinnati for Israel Bonds.
Oh, Israel Bonds.
He was in Yosel Rosensaft,
Oh,
Bergen-Belsen.
Did he?
He ran the Bergen-Belsen camp, Sam.
Well, that's in the British zone.
British zone, yeah.
So he probably didn't come into contact with any
No,
Jewish chaplains? Okay.
There might have been. I remember once coming across a South African,
Casper?
I don't remember his name, because now that you mention it, suddenly occurs to me there weren't any British that I remember, Jewish.
There were
a few.
about, I already didn't guess, but a small number.
Yeah, there was one who supposedly was, but
It was Israel Brody? Brody.
Brody?
B-R-O-D-I-E.
Let's see.
Not
He
Max
claimed, I
Bradley.
think he claimed he was. I used him as a camp director. We set up a camp for kids. Roxy something. He had a nickname. That's what I remember. Square.
Aside from Sam Donald.
I'm trying to think of who could really. Did you call? Let's see. Blanche. She was a
Bernstein?
Bernstein. Did you speak to her?
I'm trying to get a hold of him.
She is teaching at some university right now.
Oh,
Ask Herb Katsky, he would be able to.
yeah, I spoke to him with him.
Wait a minute. Morris Lau, he was the Cyprus camp director.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but that's no good.
Yeah.
That's the British. Now tell me more. I think we can
Yeah, well,
shut
we're
it up.
still,
Yeah.
now many of the chaplains have characterized some of the early JDC workers as being people who are 9-to-5ers. That is, that they treated this crisis with a business as usual attitude. How do you respond to such remarks?
I think, aside from not defending, I think that any man who makes that generalization wants to hear himself talk or quoted. I cannot conceive 9-to-5ers.
Well,
What were they going to do with the rest of their time? And remember when
Well, I'll
they
give you an
were.
example that, you're portraying a different type of situation than some of the chaplains, not the ones I meant, that these people never said anything antagonistic about your activities, but there was one chaplain who told me he went to Paris, and he had to find some information,
Well,
and it was closed on Sunday.
all right, that I understand. Paris was not a field operation. Paris was headquarters, national headquarters.
Okay.
We are closed here on Sunday, officially.
In a
and
crisis?
Saturday, and Saturday.
But not in a crisis.
When was he there? What year did he say that happened?
He was there 45, 46.
I think he has a personal, maybe he was there, so I can't conceive of 45.
No, a number of chaplains mentioned to me that
45,
that
I cannot conceive of the Paris office being closed at any time. If it was closed, it had to be closed sometime. It wasn't. There was a duty officer at all times. Someone you could reach by phone.
A number of them mentioned the fact that the JDC was not as aware or concerned or involved.
Well, let me tell you then. If this is based on the administrative office in Paris, it may be. I don't know. I won't argue.
Oh no, I don't know myself.
Any field
I don't
office,
know. Yeah.
any field office
Was not that way.
couldn't operate that way. Secondly, during 45 and 46, take my word for it, that this office in Paris had to beg, plead, telephone and whatnot for field officers to tell them what's going on in great detail, because everybody was too damn busy. I can't conceive of anyone on the staff, or there's always a goof off or a girl, as a stenographer.
Right.
But if she didn't work, where the hell could they go? The women couldn't go anywhere. There was no communication between the Germans and them. She had to stay in the house where she slept with the team. She had to eat in the same place for entertainment. If she wanted to shack up, she couldn't even shack up with a German. She had to shack up with somebody on the team or a Jew in a DP camp. So that it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And besides that, as I talk now, my mouth waters with the joy of, do you know what it is to work for once in your life, to work and enjoy it every second, waking and sleeping moment? Do you know what it is to feel like that? This was God. Every manager or every director, people, they made wills for you. I'm not joking. They didn't know what to do. And you had to fight them off so they wouldn't kiss your hand. It's, look, anybody else who did anything for Jews deserves nothing but praise. And we do here. Today, I can find in this work. In this work, it's the same thing that somebody will call. We have goof-offs in our office. After 20 some odd years, we've cleaned them out. We have no foul balls. What we have is the good man and the tolerable ones. But we had all sorts of good. I don't advertise, don't you think, that we had 2 cases. One guy committed suicide. He had sticky fingers. I wish he hadn't committed suicide because we weren't going to prosecute him. It was the bonding company. You have all kinds. I always tell people, Jews in Israel. In Israel, because he's Jewish and is Gemalek, that means he has a halo. I remind them always they have officers, they have policemen, they have jails, and they have whorehouses, and they have whores. And some Jews can't accept it emotionally. What? Aida Shemedel. So I have to take him to Miami and introduce him to him. But you see, these are things that emotionally are not acceptable. And then, in retrospect, 19, 20 years, it's a long time. I was hesitant. As a matter of fact, today when you called, I wasn't sure until I spoke. Because of this rehash, I wanted to make sure that this is a serious study. It's not just some kid, who wants to get his PhD or something. Otherwise, you're reliving. And I'm much too old to believe in reliving. I have fond memories. But whatever time is allotted to me, I want to live for today and tomorrow.
I just have a couple more questions.
Please, go ahead.
Then
You
how would
caught me
you...
at a good moment, because yesterday I didn't think something came up which had to be done. It was completely forgotten. My secretary forgot, and it normally takes a week. And yesterday, we got it out, now she's finishing it. So.
How would you characterize the role of the American Jewish chaplain during this period, 1944 to 48? If you had to characterize it.
I don't want to be repetitious. I think that with very rare exceptions, all chaplains, and for that matter, all soldiers that I met, Jewish soldiers, came closer to their Jewishness during that period than they ever had before. I only hope that many of them, after 25 years, if they're still alive, retain that closeness. Because I think they couldn't avoid coming so close under the impact of the drama and the confrontation.
What do you think would have happened if the American Jewish chaplains had not been there to help the survivors of the Holocaust?
The same thing as would have happened if JDC guys like myself weren't there. Somebody else would have been there to do that portion or a little lesser portion. But the important thing is, they would have survived.
They would have survived.
Of course.
You don't think that the involvement of these, of many yourself, did save people?
No, please. Let me enlarge.
Okay.
I don't mean, again, to denigrate, and it's a much overused word. I don't mean to denigrate the contribution of every chaplain, of every Jew, of every anybody. Undoubtedly, the situation was such, and many of those people coming out of concentration camps were such, that if they didn't get that little bit of support, of a hand out, hand up, many of them would have not made it. Many of them didn't make it with the support because we were too late. So that I don't want to give the impression that it had no value. On the contrary, it had tremendous value if it saved one human being. But the other side of the coin is, what would have happened to them if we great American Jews weren't there, whether in the under the head of the rabbinate or JDC or the State Department or whatever you want to call it, they would have survived. Just as Israel is in horrible trouble today, critical situation. But with or without help, they will survive. What the outcome, in what form they will survive, that's prognostication. I'll leave it to another one or your great-grandson who will be writing about this period. But I think it's presumptuous to say, and I'm saying it in all kindness, to pose the question in that manner.
How would you have asked it?
I don't know, you got me on the spot. I think I would make it less definite. I would say, I would ask for my opinion or somebody's opinion as to how much this particular group contributed to the effort.
See, I thought by asking this, it would be difficult to hedge. Or you're really confronted with it. I've been getting the answers that I think are honest.
True. You're asking a question, and some people will take umbrage at this, some people will resent it, some people will be lulled into the false concept that you agreed that they actually were the difference between life and death to these people. It's a subjective.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's...
It's a possibility.
Yeah, right.
It's a possibility.
Right.
So that really the question, the only reason I brought it up is because I, Max Helvarg, don't think it's the provocative question. No, not the it is a provocative question, but in another sense.
Were you involved in ORT in many respects? Was ORT very helpful?
No, we worked with ORT. There was a representative once, I remember he came with the idea of opening a shop. So, number A was procurement of the machines, opening a shop, and...
Now, we didn't talk about Abramowitz.
Now,
I think
Abramowitz, yes. Abramowitz followed her. He came later so that there was less opportunity to do what, in the early stages. So in that sense, he was deprived of the opportunity to accomplish as much. But in terms of devotion and involvement, I think he was even more involved because Abramowitz is a very emotional, a warm guy, not at her best, but he was involved probably to a greater extent emotionally, if that's possible, than Herb or I. He did everything possible in terms of helping the Jews. He thought of all sorts of schemes. Some worked, some didn't. But then I say he was involved because he got more out of it than any of us. He got a wife, lovely wife.
Do you remember some of the type of schemes that he was involved with?
I'm trying to think. Oh, he was always full of schemes, full of theory. And he'd come and I say, oh Meyer, you're the chaplain and I'm the director. We can accomplish much more. Let somebody else in your immediate family handle it. I mean, nothing was too small. When you work with a lot of people and you know that you can do a great deal more, you delegate some.
Sure.
Mike felt that if he delegated, he was not true to himself. Mm-hmm. In that sense, not that he couldn't delegate.
No, I understand. Finally, is there any area that I've not touched upon that you feel should be discussed?
Just look, again, you are concentrating on one area.
Right.
I think that's about all I can think of at the moment, vis-a-vis the chaplains. I'm not surprised that you had a little, well, it's not a confusion. It's a diametrically opposed concept of what the chaplaincy did and what the JDC did. I'm glad for that reason that I had an opportunity to talk, and I hope I straightened certain things out.
It was extremely helpful.
Huh?
It was extremely helpful.
But when you work in organizations, you learn from experience after a number of years, that there is a certain self-serving quality in everyone who speaks on behalf of himself or vis-a-vis an organization. I don't take these things too seriously. I'm glad that I have the opportunity to present to you the side as I saw it.
Well, the interesting thing is that none of the chaplains with whom I spoke to Breslau. Obviously, I didn't speak to Shubo, but I spoke to Friedman to a certain degree. Bromwitz, I haven't spoken, but nobody mentioned that was the case in your area, where the chaplain was the guy who initiated everything.
Well, you haven't spoken to any chaplain in my area. Oh, you mean you spoke
No,
to Izzy Breslau?
The type of
Yeah.
impression that I had, I think, was based on the experiences of chaplains with other workers in the JDC, other people.
You see, we had a confused situation in some of the other areas because we had, and again, I must qualify. I don't mean to cut down the social workers. They were social workers accustomed to working in New York.
Is that perhaps why some people got the 9 to 5 attitude?
Not that they didn't work from 9 to 9,
Yeah.
but they were cold, they didn't understand. As an example, I remember I had on my staff, I had a large staff there, and I had on my staff a woman who at that time was 54. She was a European, American, she was a social worker for God knows how many years. And one day, she came to me, and she said, Max, I cannot accept your supervision. I say, why, Lenny? She said, well, you don't have a social work background. I said, then all I can say to you, Lenny, is that I'm sorry for you, because if one of us must go, it won't be the director. She brought to me a big report to Paris, to Schwartz. She says, here is the report I want to send to Paris, but of course I must send it through my supervisor. I said, you want me to read it? She says, of course. I say, tell me, what is it that you're saying? Well, I can't. What have we discussed? I say, I'll take your word for it. She says, no, she insisted I read it. I read through it. I sent it on to Paris with a little note saying that I spoke to Lenny, whatever his name, sending it on, and with her knowledge, I'm attaching the following comment. Although she's not supposed to get the comment, but I read it to her. She didn't bat an eye. You know, that I'm sorry, Lenny, all I told her is that if there must be a change, I can't agree to the fact that the change will be in directors. This was taken straight, fine. We had a good laugh, you know, when I saw Joe Schwartz. I had Henry Levy. Henry Levy was the deputy to Philadelphia. Rock. And then Rock left, and we became co-directors, and then Henry Levy left a month later. Henry Levy was also a social worker, but Henry Levy was a social worker with flexibility. So that's the difference. I always said it to him, and I say it to people. I admire the social worker's discipline, but a social worker without flexibility goes by the book. Now, this is where it happened in many cases. Schwartz had a team of 150 or some sitting around for 2 months in Paris, and they were criticizing for wasting money. But the day after VE Day, the teams were in Germany, in the camps. This was it.
Now, you know, some people have suggested that the Jewish Welfare Board had had a way of moving a lot of food or supplies into Germany, into the occupied areas. And some people have wondered why JDC didn't use that avenue.
The
Do you know
Jewish
anything about it?
Welfare Board had access to move enough food for Friday night salami sandwich at services, which all Goyim came. The Jewish Welfare Board serviced the GIs.
Right.
Basically, the service consisted, to get them out, to turn out for services Friday nights.
Fine.
To induce them to come to services, they invariably got a shtickle salami, from home.
Right.
If they attempted to bring food, on behalf of JDC, there'd have been a lot of tourists. But JDC had no problem with food. Even before JDC was allowed, they sent food to me.
Food was getting in.
Sure, food was getting in, but they didn't want to recognize it, and they.
Who didn't want to recognize it?
Well, the Russians were part of that, you see, and the Americans didn't want to start. Why the hell should they start fighting? It was only after we established it on a minor thing, and I went to the Russians. There was a Jewish officer, and I tried to translate JDC, American Jewish Joint Distribution, and then it hit me. I said, the Joint. He says, why didn't you say so in the first place? The Joint? Of course they knew the Joint. And the same high principle applied as to why they knew. Mo Levitt, sent in a big shipment of penicillin at the request of the Soviet government, which he arranged.
They could get a hold of penicillin at that time?
What do you think we got a hold of? I wasn't even part of JDC. I didn't know anyone. They sent in to the Russians. And the Russians never forgot it during the war. That's how they knew the Joint. You see? These are the stories that matter. When I came to, he says, Joint, why didn't you say Joint? They knew that. Joint, I knew Joint as a child. After the First World War, I had the condensed milk, American condensed milk. Who the hell sent it to Nemirov in the Ukraine? The Joint. You see, this is where the strength lay. And when I came to Karlshorst, which was Russian headquarters in Berlin, and spoke to a guy I knew was Jewish. And he said, what about this rabbi? It was Izzy Breslov. He wanted, in 1945, called Nidra, he wanted to hold services in the Reichskanzlerei.
Right.
He tell you that?
Yeah.
So he started laughing. And I told him in Russian, I say, I'm not even going to ask you why you're smiling. But if this is such a bad idea, you understand. He was Jewish. He says, I understand, but I can't do it. Never. So if he said they did, okay.
No, he said they didn't have
They
it.
did.
No, but they,
I went,
he wanted to have it.
yes, it was a brilliant idea. I went at his behest. I went and spoke to these guys. Or there's a general, a Russian general, who was very helpful to us.
What was his name?
Huh?
Remember his name?
Let me show you a picture of him. Where the hell is he? He's in Israel now.
The Russian general?
3-star general.
He immigrated.
It's quite a story. He was the 3-star general. He was the chief quartermaster general for all the Russian occupying forces in Europe, next to Zhukov. He brought out transports of Jews from Minsk for me, just for me, because in 1945, on a Friday night, it was about August, September, I had in his house, as he called it, the labor and a Jewish meal. When I wrote to my parents, my family, they thought I went crazy. I was drinking something. He brought out transports, and it was a big SS-3. And he took in Jews as purchasing agent, put them in uniform. So they bought 80% for him and 20% for black market. And then he was picked up. The only relative he had was a young boy of 17 who's now in Detroit. I brought him in here. And I'll find it here somewhere. And then when he came, the only reason they didn't shoot him is because it wasn't a political crime. He spent many years Siberia.
Are those files of yours from that period?
No. No, I don't have them here. I have a lot of stuff. Not files, really. I have a couple of books and photographs.
Do you have any material which would be helpful for this study?
Unless it's photographs.
No, photographs.
No, you don't need it. Here. At any rate, they broke his feet, his legs, and finally, you read Hebrew?
Yeah.
That's an article on him. Finally came to Israel. So Marshak.
Yeah.
Marshak. It's a whole story. He blew it all. Here he was the head of everything, and they finally ended up in Israel flicking chickens.
Oh my.
I got hold of Sapir. Sapir gave him a job, but then of course he became a problem. He wanted an equivalent job. He was a meat, a specialist on meat. So ultimately he had this story printed, Mariv, and it's not a good story. And that upset Sapir. It reached a point, and I have a very close relationship with him. It's Sapir. I was going to say warm, if anybody can have a warm relationship. And it reached a point where I would nudge him every time by letter, by this, until he told me, look, I've done all I can for him. He did. But no matter how much he did for him,
It wasn't enough.
he couldn't give him. He sent him to South America. He wanted to be the chief of the meat processing industry in Israel. Today he's a sick man. But these were, again, things like most of them are in and that's why I'm so mad. The last time we discussed it with Joe Schwartz. Joe Schwartz became an editor, Khalila.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this book, I understand some was mentioned. I think by Bauer himself, that they cut it, they chopped it up.
Yeah.
You see, we have maybe in a couple of another generation it won't be there, because it was the fear of the German Jews who controlled, the fear of compromising their relationship with our government. Khalila B'Chazda didn't do so. As a matter of fact, there's something in the files which touched me, because I got a letter from the New York office to do something very out of the ordinary for a distant relative to find in Germany of one of the, one of the guys still around, the Ekis. And it was almost like an order. It was written with a copy of the letter. And since I couldn't care less about any of them, so I decided just cantankerously to write a letter. And I took umbrage at the suggestion implied that I was treating Jews differently. And as long as I made that point clear, then I say this man, if and when he comes, will get the best treatment. That is, the same treatment as every Jew. Well, of course, that didn't endear me.
I guess not.
But these were lighter moments, These were the things that kept us sane. Just like, as I said, the parties. Sure, I had the parties 4 days a week, and we used to dance, and the whole thing cost nothing. But don't get the idea we had them exclusively for that. Because I enjoyed them. Oh, that's a feel. That's enough.
Okay, thank you very much.
Another dog. Now make sure that it works back. You want to play some?